Carl Jung's brutal truth about why you'll never reach your potential. What if the very thing stopping you from becoming who you're meant to be is you? Not the world, not your circumstances, not even your past, but the unconscious parts of yourself that you refuse to see. Carl Jung, one of the most important psychological thinkers of the last century, didn't pull any punches when it came to the topic of human potential. In fact, he made a chilling claim, one that most people don't want to hear. You will never reach your potential. Not because you can't, but because you won't face the darkness inside you that's necessary to get there. In a world obsessed with self-optimization, goal setting, and becoming the best version of yourself, Jung's message cuts through the noise like a blade. He wasn't interested in your dreams or your vision boards. He wanted to know, have you met your shadow yet? Before we go any further, I need to ask you something. When was the last time you questioned who you really are? Not what you want, not what others think of you, but who you are beneath all the layers, beneath the identity, the ambition, the fear. Jung believed that most people aren't living their own lives. They're acting out scripts handed to them by culture, parents, trauma, and survival instincts. Scripts they didn't write but still follow. And here's the brutal truth. As long as you're unconscious of those scripts, you're not free. You're not choosing. You're reacting. And no matter how hard you work, no matter how big you dream, you will never reach your true potential until you confront the unconscious forces shaping your life. This is where Jung's idea of the shadow comes in. The shadow is everything you reject, deny, or suppress within yourself. Anger, envy, arrogance, weakness, shame. But it's also your unrealized potential, your creativity, your primal energy, your power, your capacity to destroy and rebuild. All of it gets pushed into the unconscious because it threatens your self-image. You want to be seen as good, kind, smart, disciplined. So anything that doesn't fit that image gets buried. But it doesn't disappear. It festers. And eventually, it sabotages you from the inside out. Think about it. How many times have you set a goal, started strong, then mysteriously self-destructed? How many times have you chased a version of success, only to feel empty when you achieved it? How often do you find yourself repeating patterns you know are harmful, but can't seem to stop? That's not laziness. That's not lack of discipline. That's your unconscious mind, the shadow pulling the strings. Jung believed that until you bring that shadow into the light, it will continue to run your life. He said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound insights.
Let that sink in. The very things you think are just the way life is, your anxiety, your procrastination, your fear of failure, your toxic relationships might not be fate at all. They might be symptoms of a deeper refusal to confront your inner darkness. And here's the paradox. The path to your highest potential doesn't go around that darkness. It goes through it. You can't evolve by polishing your image or stacking more habits on top of a fractured foundation. You evolve by descending into the parts of yourself you've been avoiding for years. Now you might be thinking, okay, but how? How do I face my shadow? And this is where it gets uncomfortable, because the answer isn't glamorous. It's not a 5-step morning routine or a productivity app. It's a process of radical self-honesty. You start by noticing your triggers, the moments you get irrationally angry or deeply insecure, the people you judge harshly, the traits in others that make your skin crawl. Those are clues. They point to the parts of yourself you haven't accepted yet. Jung called this projection. We see in others what we refuse to see in ourselves. So every time you react emotionally, you're being shown a mirror. The question is, are you willing to look? This isn't light work. It's not supposed to feel good. Jung called it the night sea journey, a descent into the unconscious that feels like drowning. But that descent is necessary. Because the treasure you're looking for, your potential, your power, your purpose, it's hidden in the places you've been taught to fear. And until you go there, you're just pretending. You're building castles on sand. You're chasing success while dragging a bag of unmet wounds behind you. And eventually, those wounds will demand your attention, whether through burnout, or breakdown, or some crisis that forces you to stop and ask, what am I really avoiding? Let me ask you something that might sting. What part of yourself are you most afraid to confront? The part that's lazy? The part that's manipulative? The part that's weak, or cruel, or jealous? What if the key to your greatness was hidden inside that very part? What if your refusal to face it is the only thing keeping you stuck? Jung didn't promise comfort. He promised transformation. And transformation, by definition, requires death, the death of illusion, the death of ego, the death of who you thought you were. That's the price. And most people aren't willing to pay it. That's why they'll never reach their potential. Not because they weren't talented, but because they were too afraid to meet the truth inside them. The mirror of madness, how projection, triggers, and emotional chaos reveal the real you. We like to think we know who we are, that we're in control of our choices, that our thoughts are our own and our reactions are rational. But Carl Jung warned us most of us are living in a house of mirrors. What we think is the outside world is often a reflection of our inner world. The people who irritate us, the situations that unnerve us, the emotions that rise without warning, these aren't accidents. They are messages. And if we're wise, we'll stop trying to escape them. We'll start decoding them. Because every emotional storm, every overreaction, every irrational fear is a flare from the unconscious. And Jung believed this. Until you learn to read those signals, you will live as a stranger to yourself. Let's talk about projection. You see someone arrogant and it makes your blood boil. You judge them instantly. You call them narcissistic, egotistical, a show-off. But here's the uncomfortable question Jung would ask. Why does it trigger you so much? Why does their behavior threaten your peace? You might say, because arrogance is wrong. Sure, but that's not enough. Why this person? Why this reaction? Jung believed that our strongest emotional responses, especially the ones we can't fully explain, are often projections of disowned traits. The arrogance in that person is actually a mirror. It's showing you something you've buried. Maybe your own desire to take up space, to be seen, to own your power. Maybe you were taught that confidence was dangerous, so you buried it. And now, when you see it in someone else, it enrages you not because of them, but because of what it awakens in you. This is the brutal beauty of projection. It shows you what you don't want to see in yourself. And here's the paradox. The more you reject these parts, the more they control you. They don't go away. They just go underground. They leak out in passive-aggressive comments, in self-sabotage, in addiction, in burnout. The more you try to be good, the more violently the shadow fights for expression. Jung saw this everywhere, in politics, in religion, in relationships. The people who try to appear the most moral are often hiding the darkest impulses. Because they haven't integrated their shadow, they've just repressed it. And repression always leads to chaos. So what do? You start treating your triggers as teachers. You stop blaming others for your reactions. You stop saying they made me feel this way and start asking, why did I respond like that? What part of me is being touched right now? This is the work of deep self-awareness. It's not glamorous. It's not easy, but it's the only path to real freedom. Because once you understand your projections, they lose their grip. You stop being a puppet to your emotions. You start becoming the author of your life. Let me give you an example. Imagine someone close to you criticizes your work. You feel immediate rage. Not just irritation rage. On the surface, it seems like they were rude, but if you dig deeper, you might find something else. Maybe you've tied your worth to your performance. Maybe you're terrified of being seen as incompetent. Maybe your inner critic is already so loud that any external critique feels unbearable. In that moment, the other person isn't the problem. They're a mirror. They're reflecting a wound you haven't healed. And until you heal it, you will keep attracting situations that poke it. Why? Because your psyche wants you to grow. It will keep sending you the same lesson in different disguises until you finally say, I see it now. I'm ready to face it. This is what Jung meant when he said, everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. Think about that. Every annoyance, every judgment, every emotional spike can be a window into your unconscious. If you're willing to look, most people aren't. They'd rather keep blaming the world. It's easier, safer. But it comes at a cost. They never truly evolve. They keep repeating the same patterns, the same relationships, the same failures because they're not learning. They're not listening. They're not looking in the mirror. So let me ask you something dangerous. What if every person who triggers you is a gift? Not because they're right, but because they're showing you something you need to see. What if the chaos in your emotions is actually your soul screaming for integration? What if the real you, the whole you, is hidden underneath all the things you've been trying to avoid? Jung didn't want us to be perfect. He wanted us to be whole. And wholeness means owning everything, the light and the dark, the noble and the embarrassing, the divine and the primal. It means standing in front of the mirror of madness and saying, I see you. I accept you. I'm ready to understand you. Because only then, only when you stop running from your own reflection, can you begin to walk the path to your real potential. The mask you forgot you're wearing, how the persona traps you in a life that isn't yours. There's a disturbing possibility that few of us dare to consider. What if the life you're living isn't actually yours? What if the relève you've set, what if they were never truly chosen by you, but by a version of you that was shaped by expectations, fear, and the need to belong? Carl Jung called this version of the self the persona, the mask we wear to survive social life. It's not inherently bad. In fact, it's necessary. Without a persona, we couldn't function in society. But the danger comes when we mistake the mask for our real face. When we forget that we're wearing it at all. When we become so identified with it that we no longer remember who we are underneath. Let's get real. From a very young age, we learn what is acceptable in our families, in our schools, in our cultures. We learn how to perform. If you were rewarded for being smart, you learned to act intelligent even when you were confused. If you were praised for being quiet, you learned to suppress your voice even when something inside you screamed to speak. Over time, this performance becomes automatic. You don't even notice you're doing it. You just become the responsible one, the funny one, the achiever, the helper, the rebel. These aren't identities. They're roles, scripts, masks. And the longer you wear them, the more alienated you become from your true self. Jung warned that the persona, if left unexamined, becomes a prison. A beautifully decorated one, perhaps. One that earns you approval, success, even love. But still a prison. Because every time you act from persona instead of authenticity, a part of you dies. A part of you whispers, "This isn't me." But the world applauds, so you keep going. You keep playing the part. And eventually, you forget there was ever a you before the act began. Have you ever had a moment, maybe late at night or in the middle of a conversation, when something inside you suddenly asked, "Who am I really?" Not who I appear to be, not who people expect me to be, but who I am when no one is watching. That question is the first crack in the mask, and it's terrifying. Because if you follow that question, you might discover that the life you've built isn't aligned with your essence. That your job, your relationships, your values, they're not wrong, but they're not yours. They were inherited, adopted, performed, and now they're suffocating you. This is where the real work begins, not in chasing external success, but in dismantling the persona, in peeling back the layers of who you've pretended to be, so you can meet who you've always been. But be warned, this is not a comfortable process. The persona protects you for a reason. It helps you avoid rejection. It keeps you safe. To let it go is to risk being misunderstood, judged, even abandoned. But the alternative is worse. To live a life that looks good on the outside but feels hollow on the inside. To succeed in a world that doesn't even know the real you exists. So ask yourself, what mask have I been wearing so long that I've forgotten it's a mask? Who do I become when I'm around authority? Around strangers? Around my family? Around people I want to impress? Are those versions of me real, or are they rehearsed? And underneath all of them, is there a voice I've silenced for years? A desire I've buried? A truth I've been too afraid to admit? Jung believed that true individuation, the process of becoming whole, requires the conscious confrontation of the persona. Not to destroy it, but to reclaim your freedom from it. To use it when needed, but not be ruled by it. He said, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. But that privilege is earned. It comes at a cost. You must be willing to disappoint others. To walk away from identities that once brought you comfort. To stand alone in your authenticity when the world prefers your mask. Because here's the paradox. The moment you remove the mask and dare to be who you are, you become magnetic. Not to everyone, but to the right ones. To those who see you, not for the role you play, but for the soul you are. And in that moment, you realize something extraordinary. You were never meant to be perfect. You were meant to be real. The enemy within, why the fear of your own power keeps you small, and how to break free. There's a truth so unsettling. Most of us spend our entire lives avoiding it. We are far more afraid of our own power than we are of our limitations. Carl Jung understood this with brutal clarity. He saw that human beings do not only fear failure, we fear greatness. Not because we don't want to be powerful, but because we don't know what it would mean to fully own that power. Power demands responsibility. It demands transformation. And transformation threatens everything familiar. So instead, we stay small. We hide behind excuses, distractions, perfectionism, and self-doubt, not because we're incapable, but because we're terrified of what we might become if we actually stepped into the full magnitude of who we are. Think about this. How many times have you sabotaged your progress right when things started going well? How many times have you downplayed your talents, your instincts, your vision just to make others comfortable? How often have you felt the pull to rise, to speak, to lead, and then silenced yourself before the words even reached your lips? That hesitation isn't always fear of rejection. Sometimes it's fear of the spotlight, fear of the unknown weight that comes with stepping into your potential. Because if you do, there's no going back. You can no longer pretend you don't know who you are. You can no longer shrink. You have to become. Jung warned us, the greatest enemy is not out there. It's within, the part of us that resists change, the part that clings to comfort, the part that whispers, "Who do you think you are?" That voice isn't just insecurity, it's the ego's defense mechanism. Your current identity, even if it's painful, is safe, it's predictable. And the moment you begin to transcend it, your ego feels threatened, so it fights back. It fills your mind with doubt. It distracts you with chaos. It convinces you that the old life, the smaller life, was better. But it's a lie. A beautiful, seductive lie designed to keep you in the cage you've outgrown. Jung believed that the process of individuation, of becoming whole, is not about adding more. It's about remembering your nature, your power, your truth. But to do that, you must go to war with the inner voice that says you're not ready, not worthy, not enough. You must confront the internal saboteur that thrives on your hesitation. And that confrontation is not a one-time event, it's a daily discipline, a choice. Every moment you choose authenticity over approval, courage over comfort, growth over stagnation, you chip away at the chains that bind you. Let me ask you something dangerous. What would your life look like if you stopped holding back? What would you create? Who would you become? What impact would you make if you no longer feared being seen, being heard, being powerful? Not in the egoic sense, not power over others, but the raw, grounded soul-level power that comes from alignment, purpose, truth. The kind of power that doesn't need to dominate because it simply is. That power lives in you, right now. It always has, but it's buried under layers of fear, conditioning, and self-denial. To awaken it, you must be willing to lose who you were, to disappoint the old version of yourself, to walk away from the comfort of mediocrity and into the fire of transformation. Jung said, the most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. He wasn't talking about surface-level self-love. He meant radical acceptance of your brilliance, your darkness, your rage, your genius. All of it. Because only when you accept the totality of who you are can you begin to wield your power with integrity. So here we are, at the end of this journey, and I'll leave you with this. What if the only thing standing between you and your potential is your refusal to believe it already lives within you? What if you stopped waiting for permission, for perfection, for proof, and started living like your power was real? Because it is. And the world doesn't need more people playing small. It needs you fully awake, fully alive, and finally free.